They say the Appalachian Mountains don't forget mistakes, and they never forgive them. Imagine standing at the edge of a ridge just as the morning fog rolls in, thick and heavy, swallowing the valley below. The trees seem taller than they should, the wind sharper, carrying sounds that don't belong. You hear a crack behind you, a branch snapping, and when you turn, there's nothing. No bear, no hiker, nothing. Only the quiet that presses against your ears, and a feeling that the forest is watching. Some hikers return from these mountains with stories that will chill you. Stories of nights spent wandering lost, of cold creeping into their bones in ways that no blanket could fix. Others vanish without a trace, leaving behind only footprints that fade into the moss and a pack lying abandoned on the trail. You may think you're prepared. You may think a map, a compass, or a flashlight is enough. But the mountains have a way of testing you, stretching your confidence into fear, your knowledge into doubt, your instincts into urgency. By the end of this video, you'll know the 13 rules that can save your life in these forests. The mistakes that turn ordinary trips into unforgettable, sometimes irreversible, experiences. And as we go through these rules, I want you to imagine yourself there, in the mist, hearing whispers of the forest and the unknown footsteps that trail you just out of sight. Because one wrong choice here isn't just inconvenient. It can become the last choice you ever make. The Appalachian Mountains stretch for hundreds of miles, a web of ridges, valleys, and ancient forests that have stood for centuries. Trails twist in ways maps often fail to capture. Streams appear calm, but hide deep currents, and cliffs can crumble under the slightest weight. Every season brings its own hazards. Sudden storms in summer, icy nights in winter, and fog so thick it erases the horizon entirely. Countless hikers, campers, and explorers have underestimated these mountains. They come expecting a weekend adventure, a challenge to their endurance, or a peaceful escape. But the forest doesn't reward ignorance. Every step you take leaves an impression, sometimes a footprint, sometimes a warning, sometimes something that marks you in ways you don't see. Some locals refuse to talk about certain trails, certain ridges. Their silence is a story in itself, a warning passed down over generations. There are places here that are easy to enter and nearly impossible to leave, places where the line between nature and something else seems to blur. And yet, the mountains draw us in. They challenge us. They make us test our limits. And for those who survive, for those who return with stories to tell, there's a lesson. Knowing the rules isn't just useful, it's essential. Knowing where the danger begins and where it can end is what separates a hike from a tragedy. Weather in the Appalachian Mountains can change faster than a heartbeat. A sky that seems clear at sunrise can turn gray and heavy by midday. Fog can roll in so thick that a ridge disappears completely, and temperatures can plummet in a matter of minutes, stealing warmth from even the most prepared hiker. Take, for example, the story of 3 college students in 2017. They set out early in the morning, backpacks full, spirits high, certain that a day on the trails would be easy. By noon, a dense fog had swallowed the valley. The wind cut through their jackets like a knife. The trails vanished under their feet, and the path back seemed to have disappeared entirely. Hours passed. Their shouts for help were swallowed by the forest. 2 were rescued before nightfall, hypothermic and exhausted. The third never made it out. The mountains don't wait for you to adjust. They don't negotiate. Weather is not just an inconvenience here, it's a test. Every hiker must understand that preparation is survival. Checking the forecast is not enough. You must anticipate changes, pack layers, waterproof your clothing, and carry emergency blankets and heat packs. Picture standing on a ridge as the temperature drops, your breath freezing in front of you. The fog thickens, visibility disappears. Every instinct screams to turn back, but the trail you came from is gone. This is what the mountains do. They force you to respect them, to acknowledge that weather is a boundary you cannot cross lightly. The locals know the mountains in ways no map can show. They remember trails that vanish, ridges that swallow hikers, and forests that seem to shift underfoot. Their stories, passed down for generations, are more than legend. They are warnings etched in memory and survival. Take Red Hollow Ridge, for instance. Hikers who ignored the advice of locals found themselves disoriented almost immediately. Broken branches seemed to mark the wrong path. Animal calls echoed too close, too intentional. One man in the 1980s dismissed the warnings as superstition, ventured out after dark, and was never seen again. The lesson is simple. Local knowledge is your first line of defense. Ask questions. Listen carefully. Take note of unusual signs. A tree marked with carvings, a rusted warning sign, a collapsed bridge. These aren't just remnants of history. They are boundaries, signals that the mountains communicate to those who will listen. Even seasoned hikers fall into this trap. They think they know better. The forest, however, remembers who listened and who didn't. Isolation in the Appalachians is more dangerous than most hikers realize. It isn't just the wildlife, or the weather, or the risk of losing your way. It's the way the forest shifts when you are alone, how every sound feels amplified, how shadows grow longer and closer than they should. Consider the story of a solo camper at Devil's Den. He had camped early in the evening, confident in his preparation. The first few hours were quiet, almost peaceful, until he began to hear footsteps circling his tent. At first, he assumed it was a deer, a raccoon, maybe even the wind. But the snaps of branches came in a pattern, deliberate, rhythmic. Every time he peeked outside, the forest appeared empty, but the footsteps continued. By morning, his tent was still intact, his gear untouched, yet he was gone. Search teams scoured the area, finding no trace. Only the impressions of footprints in the mud that faded abruptly into the underbrush. Some say he wandered into a hidden ravine. Others whisper that the forest itself refused to release him. The rule is clear. Never camp alone. Even if you are an experienced hiker, a single night can turn into a test of instinct, courage, and luck. Safety comes in numbers. A partner, a group, someone to check your route, someone to notice the small details you might overlook in fear or exhaustion. The trails of the Appalachians are deceptive. What appears to be a shortcut may end in nothing but fallen trees, hidden cliffs, or thick underbrush that swallows your path. Maps are guides, but they cannot account for decades of shifting terrain, washed-out streams, or trails that have disappeared entirely under years of overgrowth. Take the story of a couple in 2012. Seeking a shortcut to reach a waterfall, they veered off the marked path, certain that their instincts would guide them. Within minutes, the trail became unrecognizable. The forest seemed to close in around them. Hours later, they stumbled into a ravine, injured and disoriented. Rescue teams found only fragments of their packs. The couple barely survived, and the memory of that decision would haunt them forever. This rule is simple but absolute. Stay on marked trails. Every signpost, painted marker, or cairn exists for a reason. Every deviation is a gamble. sometimes one that the forest will not allow you to win. The Appalachian Mountains are alive, not just with trees and wind, but with creatures that have lived here far longer than humans. Bears, snakes, bobcats, and countless smaller animals all stake their claim. They notice intrusion, they react, and sometimes their reaction is enough to turn a peaceful trip into a life-threatening situation. Consider the story of a family camping in 2016. They left food unsecured outside their tent, confident that a bear would ignore them. But the night brought more than just rustling leaves. A black bear tore through their campsite, scattering supplies and damaging the tent. No one was fatally injured, but the fear of that night stayed with them. Disrespecting wildlife is not a matter of arrogance. It is a matter of survival. Animals in these mountains are territorial and reactive. One wrong step, one careless decision, and the consequences can be swift. The Appalachians are dotted with abandoned cabins, old mining structures, and remnants of settlements long forgotten. These buildings are dangerous, sometimes structurally, sometimes in ways that defy explanation. A group of explorers ventured into a decaying cabin deep in the woods. They reported hearing doors slam by themselves, whispers echoing through empty rooms, and shadows moving where no one stood. By morning, they had all fled, shaken and unnerved. Observe from a distance. Learn about history, take photographs, but never step inside. Some dangers cannot be measured by eyes or gear. There's a quiet voice in the back of your mind when you hike these mountains. A chill down your spine, a hesitation in your step. Many hikers dismiss it as nerves, imagination, or fatigue. But instinct is often your first, and sometimes only, warning. Two friends near Blackwater Creek ignored instinct, continuing their hike, despite unease. Hours later, a flash flood struck. One barely survived, the other was swept downstream. Instinct is not imagination, it is survival. The Appalachian Mountains speak in subtle ways. A sudden change in wind, an animal's unusual behavior, a trail that seems off. Those who listen often avoid harm. Those who ignore it learn the hard way. Night in the Appalachians is heavy, almost physical. Trails vanish, rocks and cliffs hide in darkness, streams turn dangerous. Many hikers ignore this rule, believing flashlights and headlamps make them safe. But light is limited. Shadows can hide holes, tree roots, and sudden drops. The forest itself seems transformed. Quiet becomes eerie, every sound amplified, every movement uncertain. In 2018, a hiker tried to reach a ridge at night to watch the sunrise. A misplaced step sent him sliding down a steep slope. He survived, but only because he had emergency gear and training. Without preparation, night becomes an unpredictable force that magnifies every mistake. Traveling during daylight is essential. When night falls, trails are no longer familiar. Even familiar paths feel treacherous. Respect the timing of the forest, or it will teach you the consequences. Streams, rivers, and creeks in the Appalachian Mountains can be deceiving. Calm on the surface, they can conceal jagged rocks, sudden drop-offs, or currents strong enough to sweep a hiker downstream. Even shallow water, underestimated by thousands, has claimed lives. In 2015, a hiker attempted to cross a seemingly gentle creek near Laurel Fork. He judged the water safe, ignoring the way it swirled around submerged branches. One misstep, and he was caught in a fast-moving current, carried over rocks, and trapped against a fallen log. Rescue teams found him hours later, battered, hypothermic, and lucky to be alive. Respecting water sources is more than caution. It is a rule of survival. Test the depth before crossing. Watch for currents and hidden obstacles. Never underestimate the force of water, no matter how calm it appears. Certain landmarks in the Appalachian Mountains seem inviting at first glance. A lone cabin atop a ridge, a strange rock formation, a hidden waterfall tucked away from the main trail. They call to explorers, tempting hikers with curiosity and the promise of discovery. But isolation carries a cost, one the forest never forgets. Consider the story of a group who sought a cliff known locally as Devil's Backbone. The formation was stunning, offering a view that stretched for miles. But the ridge was narrow, the rocks unstable, and the forest around it eerily silent. One hiker stepped too close to the edge, slipped, and vanished from sight. The others were forced to retreat, their voices swallowed by the mountain wind, leaving behind only their footprints as a warning for anyone who followed. Isolation magnifies danger. Without nearby help, a simple misstep becomes a life-threatening accident. Even if nothing physically threatens you, the psychological weight of being alone in the vast mountains can cloud judgment and increase risk. The Appalachian Mountains have existed for hundreds of millions of years, and over time they've endured storms, floods, fire, and human interference. Every footprint, every discarded wrapper, every broken branch leaves a mark, sometimes small, sometimes permanent. Travelers who fail to respect this rule often pay a price far beyond littering. Consider hikers who carved initials into tree bark or left trash near a campsite. At first, it seemed harmless, a way to mark their presence, to leave a memory. But soon, the forest seemed less forgiving. Animals became more aggressive around campsites where food or waste was left. Paths grew overgrown and disorienting, and other hikers reported unsettling experiences near these disturbed areas. Leaving no trace isn't just about preserving beauty. It's about safety. Unattended debris attracts wildlife, misdirects hikers, and can even mask dangerous terrain. Every hiker who respects the land reduces risk, not just for themselves, but for everyone who follows. The Appalachian Mountains are layered with history. Old trail markers, forgotten graves, abandoned cabins, and relics of lives lived long ago. These remnants aren't just reminders of the past. They are warnings. They tell stories of travelers who miscalculated, of settlers who disappeared, and of choices that ended in tragedy. One hiker stumbled across a weathered grave marker in a dense part of the forest. At first, it seemed like a curiosity, something to photograph and move on from. But as he continued, he realized the trail was no longer clear. Rocks that had seemed stable shifted underfoot, and faint, almost imperceptible whispers carried on the wind. By the time he retraced his steps, hours had passed that felt like minutes, and the marker remained. A silent, chilling reminder that some parts of the forest are not to be trifled with. Even the most experienced hikers have underestimated the power of these mountains when they venture alone. Isolation is more than solitude. It is vulnerability. A twisted ankle, a sudden storm, a misjudged step, or even the psychological weight of being entirely alone can become deadly. In 2014, a solo hiker set out to explore an off-trail ridge. Confident in his skill, he ignored the advice to bring a companion. Hours later, a sudden rainstorm reduced visibility to near zero. He slipped on wet leaves and fell, injuring his leg. Alone, with no one to call for help, he was forced to crawl back to the main trail, exhausted, hypothermic, and terrified. By the time he reached safety, the experience had changed him. The mountains had reminded him that confidence without backup is recklessness. By now, you've seen the 13 rules the Appalachian Mountains demand of every traveler. 1. Never ignore the weather. 2. Respect local warnings. 3. Never camp alone. 4. Stay on marked trails. 5. Never disrespect wildlife. 6. Avoid abandoned structures. 7. Trust your instincts. 8. Never travel at night. 9. Respect water sources. 10. Avoid isolated landmarks. 11. Leave no trace. 12. Don't ignore signs of the past. 13. Never go alone without backup. These aren't suggestions, they are lifelines. Every story of tragedy, every tale of a hiker lost or injured, underscores the importance of preparation, caution, and respect. The Appalachian Mountains are breathtaking, mysterious, and alive. They reward preparation, respect, and awareness, and they punish overconfidence, carelessness, and ignorance. If you take anything from this video, remember, these 13 rules are not just guidelines, they are survival. If this video helped you understand the hidden dangers and survival strategies of the Appalachians, hit subscribe to stay updated on more real horror stories and life-saving insights from the world's most mysterious places. Comment below. Which of these rules do you think is the most important, and why? The forest remembers, the mountains watch, and every choice you make echoes through the trees long after you've left.